Imagine opening your eyes and realizing that you do not know your own name. You do not know where you are. You do not know how long you have been asleep. And lying beside you are two people who never woke up. The room is not a hospital. There are no windows, no doctors, and no familiar sounds. Only machinery, artificial gravity, and a computer that seems more interested in testing your intelligence than explaining your situation. Slowly, painfully, fragments begin to return. You are Ryland Grace. You are a science teacher. You are aboard a spacecraft called the Hail Mary. And you are not orbiting Earth. You are in another star system, light years from home, carrying the last hope of the human species. This is the beginning of Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary, a story that looks like a space survival adventure, but is ultimately about something much more human. It is about fear. It is about friendship between beings who should never have been able to understand each other. And it is about the difference between being forced to sacrifice yourself and choosing to do it. Grace ever woke in space, scientists on Earth noticed something impossible. The sun was becoming dimmer, not all at once, but steadily enough that the future could be calculated. Global temperatures would fall, crops would fail, ecosystems would collapse. Within a few decades, billions of people could die. The cause was a strange line of infrared light stretching between the sun and Venus. Inside that line was a microscopic organism. Grace names it Astrophage. Astrophage behaves like life, but it also functions like an almost perfect battery. It absorbs enormous amounts of energy from stars and uses carbon dioxide from nearby planets to reproduce. It is both a biological miracle and an extinction-level threat. Humanity soon learns that nearby stars are also infected, but one star, Tau Ceti, is not dimming. Something there is keeping Astrophage under control. That single mystery becomes humanity's only chance. A mission is designed to travel to Tau Ceti, discover the answer, and send the solution back to Earth using small unmanned probes. The ship is named the Hail Mary because that is exactly what it is. Not a confident plan, not a guaranteed rescue. A final desperate throw made when every ordinary option has failed. As Grace's memories return, he remembers Eva Stratt, the woman given extraordinary authority to organize humanity's response. Stratt is ruthless because the disaster gives her no room to be gentle. She recruits Grace because he is a molecular biologist who left academic research and became a school teacher. He understands both the science and how to explain it clearly. Grace studies Astrophage, helps humanity understand its biology, and trains the mission's scientific crew. But shortly before launch, the intended specialists are killed. Grace has the knowledge required to replace them. There is only one problem. He refuses to go. This revelation changes our understanding of him. Until this moment, Grace appears to be the classic reluctant hero, an ordinary teacher who accepted a suicide mission to save the world. But he did not accept it. He was terrified. He wanted to live. Stratt had him sedated, placed aboard the ship, and given a drug that temporarily damaged his memory so he could not sabotage the mission. Grace was not sent into space as a willing savior. He was kidnapped by humanity. This is one of the novel's most important choices because it prevents Grace from becoming a perfect hero. He is intelligent, compassionate, and resourceful, but he is also afraid, and his fear is not fake modesty. When the decisive moment first arrives, he chooses himself. The rest of the novel asks whether a person who once acted like a coward can still become courageous. At Tau Ceti, Grace discovers that he is not alone. An alien spacecraft approaches the Hail Mary. The ship is crude in some ways and impossibly advanced in others. It was not built by humans. Its crew has also traveled to Tau Ceti searching for a way to stop Astrophage. Only one of them remains alive. Grace names him Rocky. Rocky is nothing like the friendly human-shaped aliens common in science fiction. He has 5 strong limbs, a body protected by a hard shell, and no eyes. He comes from a world with crushing atmospheric pressure, extreme heat, and ammonia instead of breathable air. He perceives his surroundings through sound. He cannot survive in Grace's environment, and Grace cannot survive in his. They begin separated by walls, pressure chambers, and completely different biology. At first, communication seems impossible, yet they solve it. Rocky creates objects, Grace identifies patterns, sounds become meanings, meanings become words. Their improvised language grows from mathematics, gestures, repetition, and patience. The first great victory of Project Hail Mary is not a weapon or an engine. It is translation. Two creatures from different stars decide that understanding each other is worth the effort. Grace and Rocky quickly discover that they complement each other. Grace understands biology. Rocky is a brilliant engineer. Grace knows relativity and modern astrophysics. Rocky can manufacture xenonite, a material with properties human technology cannot reproduce. Each possesses knowledge the other civilization lacks. But their relationship becomes more than an exchange of information. Rocky watches over Grace while he sleeps. Grace risks himself to protect Rocky. They tease one another, argue, celebrate discoveries, and become emotionally dependent on the only other intelligent being either of them has left. This friendship gives the novel its heart. Grace begins the story believing that he is completely alone. Even the return of his memories isolates him further because he remembers being forced into the mission. Rocky changes that. He does not know Grace's past. He does not know that Grace refused to volunteer. He judges Grace only by what he does now, and what Grace does now is help. Project Hail Mary suggests that identity is not fixed by our worst decision. Grace cannot change the moment when fear controlled him, but every day beside Rocky gives him another opportunity to become a different person. Grace and Rocky investigate why Tau Ceti has resisted the astrophage infection. They discover a nearby planet whose atmosphere contains another microscopic organism. This creature feeds on astrophage. They call it Taumoeba. The discovery is exactly what both civilizations need. If Taumoeba can be introduced into the breeding cycle of astrophage, it could reduce the infection and allow the stars to recover. But finding the organism is only the beginning. Grace and Rocky must collect it, study it, keep it alive, and breed versions capable of surviving the different conditions near Earth and Erid, Rocky's home world. Their experiments become a race against time. Every scientific answer creates another engineering problem. Every solution contains a new risk. At one point, Taumoeba escapes into the Hail Mary's fuel system and begins eating the astrophage powering the ship. The cure is now consuming the fuel Grace needs to survive. This is classic Andy Weir storytelling. Science is never magic. A discovery does not end the problem, it changes the problem. Knowledge offers power, but only when someone is willing to test it, fail, and try again. Grace and Rocky eventually succeed. They breed Taumoeba, capable of surviving where each civilization needs it. Rocky repairs and refuels the Hail Mary. The two friends prepare to return to their separate worlds. Grace carries a solution for Earth. Rocky carries one for Erid. For the first time, survival seems possible. Their goodbye is painful because neither knows whether the other will succeed. They came to Tau Ceti expecting to die alone. Instead, they found the only person in the universe who truly understands what they have endured. Then they separate. Grace begins the journey toward Earth. He can return with the answer, perhaps survive, and become the most celebrated human being in history. But he discovers a fatal mistake. The Taumoeba they bred can penetrate xenonite. Rocky's entire ship depends on xenonite containment. The organism will escape, consume Rocky's fuel, and leave him stranded in deep space. Grace now faces the real decision of the novel. He can continue toward Earth. Humanity will receive the solution. He may finally go home. Rocky and the Eridians will probably die. Or Grace can turn around, search for Rocky, and sacrifice his own root home. This choice mirrors the decision Grace faced on Earth. The first time, humanity asked him to die for everyone else. He said no. Stratt forced him onto the Hail Mary because she believed saving the species mattered more than his consent. Now no one is forcing him. There is no government in the room, no commander, no audience. No one will ever know what he chooses unless he survives. Grace sends the unmanned probes toward Earth carrying Taumoeba samples, research and instructions. Then, he turns the Hail Mary around. He goes back for Rocky. This is the moment Grace becomes a hero, not when he wakes up in space, not when he solves an equation, not when he discovers alien life. He becomes heroic when he has every reason to save himself and chooses not to abandon his friend. Courage is not the absence of fear. Grace remains afraid. Courage is what he does while the fear is still present. Grace finds Rocky's ship drifting. The prediction was correct. The fuel has been consumed and Rocky is stranded. Grace rescues him, but the rescue leaves Grace without enough resources to return to Earth. He has saved Rocky and protected Erid, but he may have traded one slow death for another. Rocky, however, refuses to accept that outcome. Together, they identify a way Grace might survive using what remains available to them. They travel to Erid for Grace. Arriving there means entering a world built for a species with completely different biology. He cannot breathe its atmosphere, eat its natural food, or walk freely among its people. The Eridians construct a protected environment for him. They create food he can digest. They give him access to the human knowledge stored aboard the Hail Mary, and Grace begins a new life farther from Earth than any human being has ever lived. Years later, Grace learns that the sun has returned to its normal brightness. The probes reached Earth. Humanity survived. His mission succeeded. Grace could be remembered on Earth as a scientist, astronaut, or savior. But on Erid, he returns to the role he chose before the crisis began. He teaches. His students are young Eridians. Their bodies, senses, and language are alien to him, but their curiosity is familiar. This ending reveals who Grace truly is. The novel spends hundreds of pages showing him solve impossible scientific problems, but his deepest identity is not genius or astronaut. He is a teacher. A teacher takes something confusing and helps another mind understand it. That is exactly what Grace does throughout the story. He teaches humans about Astrophage. He teaches Rocky about relativity. Rocky teaches him alien engineering. Together, they teach two civilizations how to survive. Education is not a side detail in Project Hail Mary. It is the model for first contact. Real communication does not begin with domination. It begins when two beings are willing to learn from each other. Ryland Grace's surname is not accidental. Grace can mean mercy, forgiveness, or an undeserved second chance. That is what the story gives him. He does not begin as the man who willingly sacrificed himself. He begins as someone who failed the moral test placed before him. But the novel does not argue that one failure defines an entire life. Grace receives another test. This time, he chooses differently. His friendship with Rocky makes that transformation possible. Because Rocky turns an abstract sacrifice into a personal one. Save another civilization is an enormous idea. Save my friend is immediate. The emotional bond gives Grace the strength that duty alone could not provide. This may be the book's most powerful argument. People do not always become brave because they suddenly start loving humanity as an abstract concept. Sometimes they become brave because one specific person matters more than their fear. Project Hail Mary celebrates science, but not as the work of a lone genius. Every major breakthrough depends on cooperation. Grace depends on researchers and engineers from Earth. Humanity depends on knowledge produced across nations. Grace and Rocky depend on each other's completely different abilities. Even the final solution comes from an ecosystem where one life form controls another. The novel rejects the fantasy that intelligence means having every answer. Grace survives because he repeatedly admits what he does not know. He observes, he builds a theory, he tests it, he corrects himself. Rocky does the same. Their friendship works because neither demands that the other become less alien. They do not erase their differences. They use them. The qualities that make communication difficult are also the qualities that make cooperation valuable. Project Hail Mary begins with a man who cannot remember who he is. By the end, the answer is no longer hidden inside his lost memories. It is revealed through his choices. He is the man who was afraid to go. He is also the man who turned back. He is a scientist who saved Earth. He is a friend who saved Erid. And he is a teacher standing in a classroom beneath another star, the novel's most important. Discovery is not astrophage, Taumoeba, or alien life. It is that heroism is not a permanent personality trait. It is a decision. Sometimes a decision made after failure. Sometimes a decision no one will witness. And sometimes the greatest distance a person travels is not from one star to another. It is the distance between the person he was when fear made the choice, and the person he becomes when love does.